Okay. Um, this is something I discovered about this subject, Black Wall Street. Literally, what? I think I'd heard smatterings of it in the past, but I wasn't sure of the validity of it. I didn't really research it either. But as later years have come on, I was hearing it that a couple of more times. Again, I didn't do any real research, but this obviously occurred, and it is one of the most sort of again. I mean, but this is part of the America. This is part of the racial evils that occurred in America, and so, but it needs to be told. And what I find a bit annoying is when you get Spike Lee, who could, in his position, garner enough money, he could go around to all these black actors that are in Hollywood now and produce much better films. Get a black studio going and protect it from anybody who would try and oppose it. Robert Redford's done it, Sundance. It's been going for a number of years now, 30, 40 years. But I don't know any studio in America that there's no sort of black Hollywood. Yet Nigeria has Nollywood, which is the third largest film industry in the world. It's not as big as Bollywood, not as big at all as Bollywood, but the point is the industry occurs and it's big across Africa and started by Igbo men. Igbo men started off this industry and it's grown to where it is today. So it would be good if the Americans black Americans could, because, for instance, some of the music that you hear now, there's a few collaborations between some of the American artists, not huge, but with some of the Nigerian artists, some of the African artists. I mean, Akon was the first that really burst into the American scene. But the thing is, Akon was really playing American style music. The thing about Nigeria's music industry, which is burst onto the scene, is it's Africanized. You can hear clearly there's, Afro beats is an African style with, American jazz, funk, fusion implemented in, but it's very clearly an African style. Fela Kuti was very popular after Bob Marley. So it's a shame that it took. I think I remember a story, a chance meeting at an airport with a Nigerian artist who recognised. I think he was starting off in Ghana or somewhere like that. I don't know. I don't know who the American artist was. Obviously a black guy. And this Nigerian, recognised him, spoke because he was a musician, and spoke to him and chit chatted to him, and played him some music. One thing that blacks in America have got to realise is that there may be a certain amount of huge amounts of discrimination, but they are one of the most powerful people. Second after the whites in America. They really are. In Africa, America are really lauded. The black influence across the world is huge. huge. Despite the problems that a few, black Americans experience. And so it's important we turn this around and use it for ourselves to move forward. We have the same problem with the hair industry, for instance. The people who control a product that is used by black people, 60% or more, is owned by Koreans who can't stand your guts. Yet black women go in there in droves. Go in there in droves. They're not supporting or don't support black businesses. So it's really up to black people. They need to sort themselves out. Oh, you get the money, they get the money from this, that, and all that. There are black people still prosperous in America, even with all the problems. Can live a fairly good life. Yes, I understand there is massive prejudice, but sometimes you have to rise above it. Rise above it. Hold your head up high. And know that the person you're dealing with who's causing you problem is usually a person who's mentally ill, has a mental sickness. If you look into their life, you'll see that their life is devoid of any real meaning or any real love. They spend the time drinking and smoking pot, or just drinking, or taking cocaine, and doing all sorts of nonsense. So it's important that. But sorry, what I'm really trying to get to is this. It's a real shame that Spike Lee is bringing out a film called The Black Klansman. What is the purpose of that film? How can a black man get into the Ku Klux Klan? It's just how can he? I mean, maybe they thought he was mentally ill, because apparently this guy worked undercover and he acted like, and they thought, oh, we can use this guy, we can manipulate this guy, and so on and so on. But I would have thought a better story to cover, because nobody's covered this, as far as I know, is Black Wall Street. Why hasn't the black directors covered Black Wall Street? Instead, we have 12 Years a Slave, which is harrowing. Black Wall Street is harrowing. But I think it would be a much better useful of a film than, I think, is it called Living Color or something? Well, I don't know what it's called. The one where the three black women who were were in NASA. They trumpeted that film. I found it quite strange that they produced that film. Of what real significance is that? To me, Black Wall Street is something that people should be proud of. And that was taken away by evil white people who could not, really hated to see that people could do what they said they couldn't do, which was to produce, run a business. But not just run a business, run a thriving business and actually make money. Let's go through this. Greenwood is a neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as one of the most prominent concentrations of African American businesses in the United States during the early 20th century. It was popularly known as America's Black Wall Street until the Tulsa race riots of 1921, in which the Oklahoma state government, with the assistance of Tulsa's white residents, massacred hundreds of black residents and razed the neighborhood within hours, destroyed the neighborhood. The riot was one of the most devastating massacres in the history of US race relations, destroying the once thriving Greenwood community. Within 5 years after the massacre, surviving residents who chose to remain in Tulsa rebuilt much of the district. They accomplished this despite the opposition of many white Tulsa political and business leaders and pertinent punitive razoring laws, whatever it is, enacted to prevent Reconstruction. It resumed being a vital black community until segregation was overturned by the federal government during the 50s and 60s. So it seemed there's a guy, I can't remember, Jesse Peterson, who said that under segregation, black people actually did much better than they did when they weren't segregated. I'm not saying that black people want to be segregated. No, they don't want to be held in, used as cattle and chickens and goats, and so you can't go here, you can't go here. But do we want segregation? No, nobody wants that. But it seemed to have helped sort of force these businesses, and it was, people were able to sell to other black people. Black people had to use other black businesses, whereas today many black businesses struggle because, and it depends on what they're selling and doing, obviously, but far more if black people were patronised and support those businesses. How many black coffee shops do you see in America? How many clothes department stores do you see owned by black people do you see in America? Chains of them. If a company like Netflix can get off the ground and become successful, where are the black thinkers out there? They need to come forward and they need to start developing products. Stop waiting for the white man to do it for you. Stop putting your hand out consistently for looking for handouts and making excuses. Black people in America today, even in places like Chicago where they're shooting themselves up, many of those guys are making money. They're making money by basically stealing off other black people, who those people go to work. But if black people were to invest in the stock market, were to set up, instead of buying a Beamer, try and put towards a house, try and find a property. If you've got the money, put it towards a property, learn a trade, do something. Because you get Ghanaians, you get Nigerians that come over, and other African people, and before you know it, they're doing very well indeed. They've set up a garage, for instance, a car. They may have come over as a mechanic, and within a few years, bang, they have a garage. 3, 4, 5, 6 garages. What is it that people from Africa or the Caribbean are able to make it, and the black American can't do it? Or not all of them, but some are struggling. So let's get back to, I'm just waffling. Desegregation encouraged blacks to live and shop elsewhere in the city, causing Greenwood to lose much of its original vitality. Since then, city leaders have attempted to encourage other economic development activity nearby. So let's go through this history. Many black Americans moved to Oklahoma in the years before and after 1907, which is the year Oklahoma became a state. Oklahoma represented change and provided a chance for black Americans to get away from slavery and the harsh racism of their previous homes. You know, it must have been horrendous. But you know, if you think it's bad now, it was live. Black people lived in the pits of hell in America back in those days. Just horrible, horrible. You know, most of them travelled from the states, and I hope provided all people with a chance to start. I travelled to Oklahoma by wagons, horses, trains, and even many of the black Americans who travelled to Oklahoma had ancestors who could be traced back to Oklahoma. Many of these settlers were relatives of black Americans who had travelled on foot with the 5 civilized tribes along the Trail of Tears. I don't know what that's about. Others were the descendants of people who had fled to Indian territory. Right, okay. So those who were able to escape slavery and or you know, and get away from, you know, some of these quite frankly evil, nasty, well, you know, these bastards are in hell. I hope there's a hell, and I hope these people who cause this kind of suffering on this planet are now suffering themselves. You know, many black residents also from the various Muskie speaking peoples, such as Creeks, Seminoles, I can't pronounce it, and the Yukuchi, while some had been adopted by the tribe after the emancipation proclamation. My dyslexia is particularly bad, or just can't pronounce things properly. But you can see what it is. They were thus able to live freely in the Oklahoma territory. So obviously, it looked like, you know, American Indian tribal people, you know, were able to help black people, and probably help try and shield them and hide them, because they themselves were persecuted by and, you know, massacred by the white man, and so they understood what black people were going, because they could see for themselves, obviously, that they were, you know, enslaved and suffered. When Tulsa became a booming and rather well noted town in the United States, many people considered Tulsa to be 2 separate cities rather than one city of united communities. The white residents of Tulsa referred to the north of the Frisco railroad tracks as Little Africa. So there you go. It was a city that was split in half, or split basically. This community later acquired the name Greenwood, and by 1921 it was home to about 10,000 black people. Greenwood was centered on a street known as Greenwood Avenue. This street was important because it ran north for over a mile from the Frisco railroad yards, and it was one of the few streets that did not cross through both black and white neighborhoods. The citizens of Greenwood took pride in this fact because it was something they had to all sorry they had all to themselves and did not have to share with the white community of Tulsa. That must have been great. That must have been fantastic for these people that they didn't have to share something with white people. I'm sorry, this sounds harsh, but white people have caused a lot of problems in the world. I don't want to, it's fact, and I'm not making up black people are angels. I mean, no, I'm not. But they have caused problems. They caused World War I, World War II. Everybody was incapacitated. Is there going to be a World War III? We don't know. And I sound a little bit bitter, but my heart feels for these people who suffered. Literally, you people don't know what suffering is. They experience horrendous, horrendous suffering. So, uh, so they took pride in that, and that was nice. That was good for them. Greenwood Avenue was home to the Black American Commercial District, with many red brick buildings. These buildings belonged to black Americans and they were thriving businesses, including grocery stores, banks, libraries, and more. Greenwood was one of the most affluent communities and it became known as Black Wall Street. So, it's a shame. Maybe many of these businesses could have become nationwide. The banks, the stores could have grown to be, you know, big names like Kentucky Fried Chicken or Wall Street, Walmart, or you know, Sears, etc., etc. But it wasn't to be. Wasn't to be. During the oil boom of the 1910s, the area of northeast Oklahoma around Tulsa flourished, including the Greenwood neighborhood, which became known as, here we go, the Negro Wall Street, now commonly referred to as the Black Wall Street. The area was home to several prominent black businessmen. Tulsa boasted a variety of thriving businesses that was very successful up until the Tulsa race riots. Not only did black Americans want to contribute to the success of their own shops, but there were also racial segregation laws that prevented them from shopping anywhere other than Greenwood. Cool. That's why they became successful. Black people were forced to shop in their own shops, not running off to white man's shop to shop like they do today. In America, the resentment of black people, yet black people make some of these stores billions of dollars a year. So while they follow some black guys around the store, they still want your money. They still want your money. They still want your money. When you've made your money, get out of the store. You bought your stuff, get out. Yeah. So, Detroit Avenue along the edge of Steinpike Hill contains a number of expensive houses belonging to doctors, lawyers, and business owners. The buildings on Greenwood Avenue house the offices of all of Tulsa's black lawyers, retailers, doctors, and other professionals. In Tulsa at the time of the riot, there were 15 well-known black American physicians, one of whom, Dr. A.C. Jackson, was considered the most able Negro surgeon in America by the Mayo brothers. Who is this Mayo brothers? Let's have a look. Very, very interesting. It's been going for 154 years. Mayo Clinic is a non-profit profit medical practice and medical research group based in Rochester, Minnesota. It employs William Mayo settled his family in 1864 and opened a medical practice that evolved under his sons into Mayo Clinic. Right, okay. So yeah, so that's what they are. So this guy was the founder. Anyway, so let's get back. So even the, Mayo accepted that this guy was considered one of the most able black surgeon in America. Dr. Matt, here we go. Dr. Jackson was shot to death as he left his home during the unrest. So he just walked out of his door, bang, 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 dead. Greenwood published 2 newspapers, the Tulsa and the Oklahoma Sun, which covered not only Tulsa but also state and national news and elections. Right, so we don't see any more about what happened this guy. Building newspapers tried deconstruction of Greenwood. Greenwood was a very religious, active community. At the time of the racial violence, there were more than a dozen black American churches and many Christian youth organizations and religious societies in northeastern Oklahoma. Sorry, everybody. Gonna have to pause. Just gonna put this on pause. I'll be back in a minute. Okay. Sorry. It was a very active community. At the time of the racial violence, there were more than a dozen black American churches, many Christian youth organizations and religious societies. In northeastern Oklahoma, as elsewhere in America, the prosperity of minorities emerged amidst racial and political tension. The KKK made its first major appearance in Oklahoma shortly before one of the worst race riots in history. It is estimated that there were 3,000 so never hand in this writing to be surprised. So there was an estimated 3,000 members of the clan in Tulsa at the time. But as you can see, citation needed, reliable source needed for the whole sentence. So that was April 15th. So obviously someone's probably saying, come on, prove it. So I'm just reading out what was said, but around the start of the 20th century, Mr. Grawley, a transversed the United States to participate in the Oklahoma Land Run of 1889. The young entrepreneur had just resigned from a presidential appointment under President Grover Cleveland in order to strike on his own. In 1906, Mr. Grawley moved to Tulsa, where he purchased 40 acres of land, which was only to be sold to coloureds. Black ownership was unheard of at the time. So this sounds like this occurred during a fairly short amount of time, sort of 20 odd years. 20 years is quite a long time, but the Great Secession it's fairly short. In 1906, among Grewley's, I think it's Grewley's, I can't pronounce it. I'll just call him G. First business was a rooming house which was the railroad tracks. This road was given the name Greenwood Avenue, named for a city in Mississippi. The area became very popular amongst black migrants fleeing the oppression in Mississippi. They would find refuge in G's building as the racial persecution from the South was non-existent in Greenwood Avenue. In addition to his house, Mr. G built 3 two-story buildings and 5 residences and bought an 80-acre farm in Rogers County. Mr. G also founded what is today Vernon AME Church. Implication of color segregation. This implications this implementation of colored segregation set the Greenwood boundaries of separateness that existed to this day. Pine Street to the north, Archer Street and the Fresco tracks to the south, Cincinnati Street to the west, and Lansing Street on the east. The segregation is pronounced as landmarks. South of Archer, Greenwood Avenue does not exist in white neighborhoods. Okay. Another black American entrepreneur, J.B. Stratford, arrived in Tulsa in 1899. He believed that black people had a better chance of economic progress if they pooled their resources, worked together, and supported each other's businesses. Great fact. That's what black people in America need to do. But I suppose in some ways, as long as black people are really quite fragmented in America, the authorities there can control to some degree their progress, hold them down as much as possible. He bought large tracts of real estate in the northeastern part of which he had provided exclusively to others. Mr. G and a number of other blacks soon followed. Stratford later built the Stratford Hotel on Greenwood, where blacks could enjoy the amenities of the downtown hotels who served only whites. It was said to be the largest black-owned hotel in the United States. Mr. G's promise and wealth was short-lived. In a matter of moments, he lost everything. During the race riot, the G Hotel at 12N Greenwood, the street's first commercial enterprise, valued at $50,000, was lost, and with it, Brunswick, Bullard, Parlour, and Dock Eastmand, and Hughes Caff. Mr. G also owned a two-story building at 119N Greenwood. It housed Carter's barbershop, Hardy Rooms, a pool hall, and cigar store. All were reduced to ruins. By his account and court records, he lost nearly $200,000 in the 1921 race riot. See, this needs to be, this is a story that needs to be told. Here we go. This is a picture here. Black Wall Street in flames, June the 1st, 2021. So it happened. Otherwise, what's the point of telling this story? I mean, it obviously happened. Because of his leadership role in creating this self-same inclusive black enclave, it had been falsely rumoured that Mr. G was lynched by a white mob and buried in an unmarked grave. However, according to the memoirs of Greenwood pioneer B.C. Franklin, Mr. G exiled himself to California. In other words, he decided to get out of the town and live somewhere else. The founder of the most successful black community of his time vanished from the history books and drifted into obscurity. He is now being honoured in a 2008 documentary film called Before They Died: The Road to Reparations for the 1921 Tulsa race riot survivors. Why not just call it Black Wall Street? It would have been a better title than that nonsense, Before They Die. It would have just been a lot better. May 31 and June 1st, 1920. So it went on for the day. During the massacre, 35 square blocks of homes and businesses were torched by mobs of angry whites. The ransacking began because of the alleged assault of a white escalator operator, 17-year-old Sarah Page, by a black shoeshiner, 19-year-old Dick Rowland. The attack killed thousands and left an estimated 10,000 people homeless. The city government of Tulsa conspired with the mob, arresting more than 6,000 black residents and refusing to provide them with protection or assistance. Law enforcement officials used aircraft to drop firebombs on buildings, homes, and fleeing families, stating they were protecting against a Negro uprising. So people were trying to escape and leave. They basically the police were assisting the mobs of the white police to kill and were upright. Yeah. Okay, continue. The massacre was omitted from state and local records and rarely mentioned in history books, classrooms, or even in private. So, because it's important that it was hidden um, because of the federal government, so that the federal government could not, um, you know, of America force these or do any investigation or whatever. Um, Everybody knows conspiracy, this event never happened. If it, there's so much information there, it not have not happened. Um, the community mobilized its resources and rebuilt the Greenwood area within 5 years of the Tulsa race riot, in spite of political efforts to prevent reconstruction, and the neighborhood was a hotbed of jazz and blues in the 1920s. During the Great Depression, however, the area became known for vice and crime. The neighborhood fell prey to economic. Yeah. So basically, the massacre has been omitted from state and local records. So, in order to pretend that this never happened. So this is the reason why I say Spike Lee needs to make a film about this, so that the world gets to see what went on. Something occurred that is from history. This was heinous, and we know about the 6 million Jews that were killed, and we consistently hear this for the last 70 years. But to bury something that happened of this magnitude is disgraceful. The same thing that happened with the Korean War. That was in the 50s. There were a few records, but yet it occurred. The North Korean War, it occurred. The community mobilized resources to rebuild, blah blah blah. Okay, however, the area, yeah, I've already said that. The neighborhood fell prey to an economic and population drain in the 60s, which is not surprising. Everybody wanted to get out of there now because of the evil Antichrist gone in there and spoiled the place. In the 60s, the area was left during renewal in the 90s to way for a highway loop around the downtown district. Several blocks around the intersection of Greenwood Avenue and Archer Street were saved from demolition and have been restored in recent years, forming part of the Greenwood Historical District. Thank goodness for that. Improvements and revitalization. Here we go. Revitalization and preservation efforts in the 1990s and 2000s resulted in tourism incentives and memorials. John Hope Franklin Greenwood Recollection Park on the victims of the Greenwood Chamber of Commerce plans a larger museum to be built in participation from the National Park Service. In 2008, Tulsa announced that it sought to move the city's minor league baseball team, the Tulsa Drillers, to a new stadium, now known as One OK Field, to be reconstructed in the Greenwood district. The proposed development was a hotel, baseball stadium, and a mixed-use district. With the stadium, there will be extra development for the city blocks that surround the stadium. This project will bring Greenwood Historical District out front and centre and attract not only tourists but also Tulsa residents to North Tulsa. Um, the Greenwood Historical District is bounded by the Crosstown Express on the north. I can't pronounce it. This is terrible. Avenue on the west, Greenwood Avenue on the east, and the Fresco Tracks on the south. The city of Tulsa operate district on September 9, 2011. August the 8th, 2012, the coordinator of the National Register program wrote the Tulsa Preservation Commission that the proposed district would be renamed as the Tulsa Race Riot of 1921. As of November 2014, the proposed historic district had not been implemented. So, is that going to be done? Has it been done? We don't. So, here we go. Here's some sort of points of interest. I won't go through these. But what I'd like to say about is I really would like some black directors stop fussing about nonsense. Let's produce things like this that are very, very important. You know, I don't think there is produced anything yet. We've had Malcolm X, which is the Black Panther movie about the Black Panthers in America. That their movement. There needs to be a solid film about that. If there hasn't been one, and there needs to be one about this. This is very, very important. And one of the reasons why, when black people have tried to grow their own business, they are consistently, um, you know, pushed down, and it's taken away from them, because this was taken away from them in one of the most brutal ways in the history of America. The same thing has occurred in the hair industry. This is owned. Can you believe by people that don't have our hair, our skin, and it's owned by the Koreans? What do Koreans know about black people's hair and black people's products? But they don't. And so we've got to find a way of getting that back, taking that away from them. It's not their business to be running the black hair business. Black people should be doing that. Look at BET. BET is an example of a business that was set up by a black woman to be successful. But now she has regrets selling the business off. Why don't black people set up another black entertainment channel to rival it? You know, one of the good things about Nigeria, we have the Nollywood industry. In the UK, we see two channels. One called Nollywood, and the other one called Rock, ROK. Two film channels displaying Nigerian film. Fantastic. That was an entertainment channel, Nigerian entertainment channel that will be as popular. But where is there a black film industry in America? Because as much as we dislike some of the behaviour of black people in America, they have influence, whether we like it or not. So, black people need to come out of the quagmire, educate the children, stop the nonsense, and use in thinking, rather than looking at everything as being racist. But even if it is, rise above it, plough through it. Don't let it pull you down. Play by the rules and the regulations of the white man and pull yourself up. And that's the only way forward for black people. Stop blaming the white man for your problems today. We know what went on in the past, and it was truly, truly evil and horrendous. But we are here today with the opportunities that black people have. If you're a black person and you're moaning and groaning and bitching at conditioning, go abroad to Africa and visit Africa, because millions and millions of black Americans have never traveled to Africa. Yet you claim to be African American. It would be better to change your name to Black American, because that's what you are. You're not African. See, even Irish of Irish descent still class themselves as American. Might occasionally call themselves Irish Americans, Italian Americans, but they're first and foremost American. People still distinctly call themselves Black Americans or African Americans. Whereas people of Irish descent, of English descent, or European descent, first and foremost see themselves as Americans, and then whatever descent they come from Irish, Italian, Jewish, American, blah blah blah. So it would be nice if, as I said before, black director, me or someone else, pick up the mantle and produce a proper big film. I think this would really be a good story. But the thing that obviously the thing that caused the thing was the ransacking began because of the alleged assault of a white escalator operator. So we don't really know how this came about. Was it deliberately just to have an excuse to cause this riot, because the white girl was raped, and if true men be put to taken to justice and protected under judicial law. Because obviously what was going to happen, because I read somewhere else, that the reason there was a lot of white people already in the area, and black people went down there with guns and whatever, and there had been fighting began, and I think 10 white men were killed, and 2 black guys were killed, and that obviously angered them even, to the nth degree. That's why they came really, running through. Let's see what this says here. We've got the original. Do we know if it's definitely? So 39 people died, according to the Red Cross. Then an Oklahoma Commission on the Race Riots final report: non-fatal injuries over 800. White mob and the police. Okay, so the attack was carried out on the ground and by air, destroyed more than 35 blocks of the district. At the time, wealthy black community in the nation. So there was obviously, someone could say this was probably planned, probably by the business leaders, the white business leaders, who were obviously jealous, angry. They didn't want to see black people prosper. They didn't want to see black people, and they more than 800 people were admitted to hospitals, and more than 6,000 black residents were arrested and detained, many for several days. Can you imagine 6,000 people were arrested? 6,000 people. Well, more than half the residents of that term. The Oklahoma Bureau of Vital Statistics officially recorded 39 dead. So, it was important to say, just 39 people died. Just one was too many, but 39. The American right now in weekend after an elevator operates at a commercial building. And look, it probably happened, but then again, it may not have happened. But let's say it did. It was necessary for this man to be protected, because they knew that the black community knew he wasn't going to get justice. He was going to be lynched. As it said, after he was taken to custody, rumours raced through the black community that he was at risk of being lynched. And obviously, if the police obviously helped the rioters, kill black people in the streets of Oklahoma, then it's obviously this was a possibility. So if the man didn't warrant him being lynched, he needed to be tried. If he didn't do it, it would have been an innocent man who would have been lynched and killed. It's just man. Police would have just gone. A group of armed African American men rushed to the police station, where the young suspect was held, to prevent a lynching, as a white crowd had gathered. So they were obviously there. The white crowd, white men, and probably a few white women were there because they were pissed. So they were there. Shots. Uh, sorry. A confrontation developed. A confrontation between black and white people. Shots fired, and 12 people were killed. 2 white and 2 black. So obviously, maybe the majority of the whites were not armed. There may have just been 1 or 2 of them armed. But because of the blacks came there with guns, virtually all of them, I don't know how many, the majority of white people killed. So this obviously pissed the white community even more, because they came there, people were killed and 2 blacks being killed. As news was spread throughout the city, mob violence exploded. So there you go. The whites were pissed. Thousands of white people rampaged through the black community that night and the next day. Thousands of white people, killing men and children, burning and looting shops and homes. About 10,000 black people were left homeless. Property damage amounted to more than 1.5 million in real estate, roughly about 31 million today. But why get in there to protect this young man? They must have known that what they were doing was going to anger. Why didn't they set siege in that town? Because they must have known that the whites were going to come for blood. They must have known. And yet they didn't do anything. They just went off home. During the night they came and started killing black people. They weren't ready for them. Some black people claimed that police had joined the mob. Others said that National Guardsmen fired machine guns to the black community and a plane dropped 6 of dynamite. You know, many of the police were, well, I would say probably all of the policemen were Klansmen. The National Guard, Klansmen. So I wouldn't be surprised. In an eyewitness account discovered in 2015, Greenwood attorney Buck Colbert Franklin described watching a dozen or more planes, which had been dispatched by the city police force, drop burning balls of turpentine on Greenwood's rooftops. Many survivors left Tulsa. Both black and white residents who stayed in the city were silent for decades about terror. The riot was admitted from local and state, as well as national histories. The Tulsa race riot of 1921 was rarely mentioned in history books, classrooms, even in private. Blacks and whites alike grew into middle age unaware of what had taken place. So this needs to be recorded as a film. And of course they're not going to teach this in schools, certainly not in white schools. As far as they're concerned, never happened. And this needs to be acknowledged of what occurred and what can occur. And But this is the reason why white people have got to understand that when black people behave the way that they do now, the uppity, it's because of these issues. You consistently, white people have gone into black communities to destroy them. The need to keep black people under. This is an example. When a lot of people ourselves say we need to move on, and it's difficult when you read something like this that occurred, and no justice has really been done. Those white people that killed thousands of people, what happened to them? Nothing. If a white girl got raped, you know, uh, it occurred. But today, it occurs, that person's arrested, that person's put in jail. Done. The man was caught. He should have been tried and then put in jail. Finish. But no. White people saw themselves as superior. You can never touch a white girl. You can give her never go next to a white girl. And so on and so on and so on. For this, that would occur, we don't know. To create the tension, so that there would be something would happen, give them an excuse to destroy the town. We don't know. But anyway, I've said my bit, and this doesn't need to really sort of cover any more. Let's have a look. With the number of, let's just read this bit, and then I'll call it a day. With the number of survivors declining in 1996, the 75th anniversary of the riot, a bipartisan group in the state legislature authorized formation of the Oklahoma Commission to study the Tulsa race riot of 1921. Members were appointed to investigate events, interview survivors, hear testimony from the public, and prepare a report on events. You see, the thing is, white people know, their people in that town know what occurred, even though they try to admit it from the national press. Okay, which they successfully done. But the point and the fact of the matter is, we as black people, or certainly black people in America, up, the 31st of May, 30th of May, that Memorial Day needs to be banged. If the national news doesn't want to pick it up, stuff them, go to hell. But in that town, black people need to mark that day. If the national press doesn't want to know, they can go to hell. Other black people across the world, put it on Facebook and notify people, other black people across the world, to participate in that. White people don't want to, don't have to, because it affected white people, both black and white people, not just black people, but white people as well. So, it needs to be, but obviously the effect was much, much more heavier felt by the black community. So, the report was commissioned, members were appointed. The commission's final report, published in 2001, said that the city had conspired with the white mob against the Tulsa black community. It made a of reparations to survivors and their descendants. The state passed legislation to establish some scholarships for descendants of survivors, encourage economic development of Greenwood, and develop a memorial park for the victims. Good. I mean, I'm not a great fan of reparations across the whole country for black people, but I think in this instance, it needs to be. That city was erased by white people. Nothing was paid for that in black lives. So yeah, that's good. That's great. So let's see how far this goes on and helps black people of that community. Encounter in the escalator. Let's just click through. It is alleged sometime around or after 4 p.m. 19-year-old Dick Rowland, a black shoe shiner employed at a Main Street shoe shine parlor, entered the only escalator of the nearby Drexel building at 319 South Main Street to use the top floor restroom, which was restricted to black people, so they had to go to the top floor. As inconvenient as possible. You need to use the toilet, not down at the ground floor, right up the top floor. He escorted Sarah Page. Encountered Sarah Page, the 17-year-old white escalator operator who was on duty. That's unusual. Because I thought most of the escalator were boys. Bell boys. The two likely knew each other, at least by sight, as this building was the only one nearby with a restroom which Rowland had expressed permission to use, and the escalator operated by Page was the only one in the building. A clerk at Rinberg's, a clothing chain located at the first floor of Drexel, heard what sounded like a woman's scream and saw a black man rushing from the building. The clerk went to the escalator and found Page in what he said was a distressed state. Thinking she had been assaulted, he summoned the authorities. The 2001 Oklahoma final report notes that it was unusual for both Rowland and Page to be working downtown on Memorial Day, when most stores and businesses were closed. It suggests that Rowland had a simple accident, such as tripping and steadying himself against the girl, or perhaps they were lovers and had a quarrel. Don't know. This is a suggestion. Who knows? Whether and to what extent Dick Rowland and Sarah Page knew each other has long been speculation. Exactly. It seems reasonable that they would have at least been able to recognize each other on sight, as Rowland would have been regularly ridden in Page's escalator on his way to and from the restroom. Others, however, have speculated that the pair might have been lovers. A dangerous and potentially deadly taboo, but not an impossibility. Whether they knew each other or not, it is clear that both Rowland and Page were downtown on that day, the 30th, Monday the 30th, 1921. Although this too is cloaked in some mystery On Memorial Day, most, but not all, stores and shops were closed in Tulsa, yet both Rowland and Page were apparently working on that day. Yet in the days and years that followed, everyone who knew Rowland agreed to one thing, that he would never be capable of rape. The word rape was rarely used in newspapers or academia in the early 20th century. Instead, assault was used to describe such an attack. Although the police investigated Page, no written account of her statement has been found. It is generally accepted that the police determined what happened between the two teenagers was something less than assault. The authorities conducted a low-key investigation rather than launch a manhunt for her alleged assailant. Afterward, Page told the police that she would not press charges. Regardless of whether assault had occurred, Rowland had reason to be fearful at the time. Such an accusation alone put him at risk for attack by white people. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Rowland fled to his mother's house in the Greenland neighborhood of the black community. But the thing is, so afterward, Page told the police that she would not press charges. But for what? Something had occurred. In that lift. On the morning after the incident, Detective Harry Carmichael and Harry C. Park, a black patrolman located at Rowland and Greenwood Avenue, located on Greenwood Avenue, detained him. Park was one of two black officers on the city's approximately 45-man police force. So there were two black officers in that police force in Oklahoma City. Rowland was initially taken to the Tulsa City Jail at First and Main. Late that day, Police Commissioner J.M. Arkson said he had received an anonymous telephone call threatening Rowland's life. He ordered Rowland to the more secure jail on the top floor of the Tulsa County Courthouse. Word quickly spread in Tulsa's legal circles. As patrons of the shoe shine where Rowland worked, many attorneys knew him. Witnesses recounted hearing several attorneys defending him in personal conversations with one another. One of the men said, "Why, I know that boy, and I've known him a good while. That's not in him." Okay. The Tulsa Tribune, one of two white-owned papers published in Tulsa, broke the story in that afternoon's edition with the headline, "Nab Negro for attacking girl in an escalator," describing the alleged incident. According to some witnesses, the same edition of the Tribune included an editorial warning of a potential lynching of Russell Negro tonight. The paper was known at the time as a sensationalist style of news writing. All original copies of the issue of that paper have apparently been destroyed. Wow. And the relevant page is missing from the microfilm copy so the exact extent of the column and whether it existed at all remains in dispute. Wow. Twilight Zone. I've just said that. Twilight Zone. Or we just live in a. Do we live in a Matrix-y type of world, or just Twilight? Just complete nonsense. Additional tribune hit streets after 3 p.m. and soon news spread of potential lynching. By 4 p.m., the local authorities were alert. White people began congregating at and near the Tulsa County Courthouse. By sunset, at 7:34 p.m., the several hundred white people assembled outside the courthouse appear to have the markings of a lynch mob. So they probably had a piece of rope or something. That's the markings of a lynch mob. The newly sheriff of Tulsa County, with a name like that, sounds like he's either Scottish, Irish, Scottish, was determined to avoid events such as the 1920 lynching of white murder suspect Roy Belton in Tulsa. So another one has occurred in 1920, a lynching, which had occurred during the time of his predecessor. This sheriff was determined to avoid the same event. The sheriff took steps to ensure the safety of Roland. So he organized his deputies into a defensive formation around Roland, who was obviously terrified. The sheriff positioned 6 of his men, armed with rifles and shotguns, on the roof of the courthouse. He disabled the building's escalator and had his remaining men barricade themselves at the top of the stairs with orders to shoot any intruders on sight. The sheriff went outside and tried to talk the crowd into going home, but to no obvious avail. According to account by Scott Ellsworth, sheriff, about 8:20 p.m., 3 white men entered the courthouse, demanding that Roland be turned over to those bastards. So, bunch of wankers walk into the courthouse and demand that the sheriff hand them over to those bastards. Although vastly outnumbered by the twats, the growing crowd of twats on the street, sheriff turned the bastards away. I take my hat to you, sir. I take my hat off to you. So let's just read through this. It's very, very interesting. Office of Help, a few blocks away on Greenwood Avenue. Members of the black community gathered to discuss the situation at the courthouse. Given the recent lynching of Belton, a white man accused of murder. They believed that Ronan was greatly at risk. Okay. Well, lynchings used to happen quite a lot in the West, in America, and so, obviously, blood got lynched, but lynching is not preserved of black people. It happened in the West as well, the Wild West. The trouble is, it does, when someone says lynching, it automatically think of now black people, but it did occur between with white people. The community was determined to prevent the lynching of the young black man, but divided about tactics. Young World War One veterans were prepared for a battle by collecting guns and ammunition. Older, more prosperous men feared a destructive, like which they were right. Mr. G walked into the courthouse where the sheriff assured him that there would be no lynching. Returning to Greenwood, Mr. G tried to control the group but failed. So obviously this guy, Mr. G, was not able to control this. But so had he been that had been able to control this mob, sorry, not mob, these black guys with guns, would there have been a riot? What would have happened? Because it doesn't say what would have happened to the sheriff. How would he have got Roland out of that building? From the roof to the helicopter? Did they have helicopters in those days? In 1920 that were flying? I think they were still flying with biplanes. I don't know how they would have got him out of that building with his men. They would have got, if he'd have gone with his men, they would try to get out the front of that building. They would have killed. There would have been shootings of some form. Anyway, about 7:30 p.m., a mob of approximately 30 black men armed with rifles and shotguns decided to go to the courthouse. The sheriff and his deputies to defend Roland from ensuring that Roland was safe. The sheriff and his black deputy, Barney Cleaver, encouraged the men to go home. Having seen the armed black people, some of more than 1,000 white people at the courthouse went home for their own guns. Others headed for the National Guard Armory at 6th Street and Norfolk Avenue, where they planned to arm up. The armory contained a supply of small arms and ammunition. Major Jones of the 100th Infantry already learned of the mounting situation downtown and the possibility of breaking, and he took appropriate measures to prevent this. He called the commanders of the 3 National Guard units in Tulsa, who ordered all Guard members to put on their uniforms and report quickly to the armory. When a group of white people arrived and began pulling at the grating over the window, Bell went outside to confront a crowd of 300 to 400 men. Bell told them that the National Guard members inside were armed and prepared to shoot anyone who tried to enter. After this show of force, the crowd withdrew from the armory. At the house, the crowd had told 2,000 pieces. Many of them now armed. Several local leaders, including Reverend Charles W. Kerr, pastor of the First Presbyterian Church, tried to calm the mob action. Tried to dissuade the mob action. The chief of police, John A. later claimed that he tried to talk the crowd into going home. Anxiety Greenwood Avenue was raided, the black community was worried about the safety of Roland. They should have been worried about their own safety. So black men began to venture towards the house up for colonists to demonstrate they were prepared to take action to protect Roland. Many white men interpreted these actions as a Negro uprising and became concerned. Eyewitnesses reported gunshots, presumably fired into the air, increasing in frequency during the evening. Second offer. In Greenland, rumours began to fly, in particular the report that whites were storming the courthouse. Shortly after 10 p.m., a second larger group of approximately 75 armed black men, decided to go to the courthouse. They offered their support to the sheriff, who declined their help. According to witnesses, a white man is alleged to have told one of the armed black men to ha ha. Oh my God. According to witnesses, a white man is alleged to have told one of the armed to surrender his pistol. The man refused and a shot fired. That first shot may have been accidental or meant as a warning. It was a catalyst for an exchange of gunfire. More likely, if this guy if that's the case, it's more a case of he probably said, told one of the armed black men to surrender his pistol. He refused. He then, depending on how far he was, probably went to grab it, and the shot was fired. So that's what set off the. If that's the case, that's what set off the riot. The gunshots triggered an almost immediate response by the white men, many of whom fired on the black people, who fired back at the white people. Well, obviously. The first battle was said to have lasted a few seconds or so, but took a toll, as 10 white people and 2 black people lay dead or dying in the street. The black contingent retreated toward Greenwood. A rolling gunfight ensued. The armed white mob pursued the black people towards Greenwood, with many stopping to loot local stores for additional weapons and ammunition. Along the way, innocent bypassers, many of whom were leaving a movie theatre after the show, were caught off guard by the mob and began fleeing. Panic set in as the white mob began firing on black people in the crowd. The mob also shot and killed at least one white man in the confusion. At around 11 p.m., members of the Oklahoma National Guard unit began to assemble at the armory to organize a plan to subdue the rioters. Several groups were deployed to guard at the White House, the courthouse, police station, and other public facilities. The local chapter of the American Legion joined in on patrols of the street. The forces appeared to have been deployed to protect the white districts adjacent to Greenland. Okay. This manner of deployment led to the National Guards being set in apparent opposition to the black community. What do you expect? As I said, probably most of those National Guard were Ku Klux Klan members. So what's the issue? Why is anyone would be surprised? Or besides that, the community, they're going to protect the whites. They're going to protect the whites. The National Guard began rounding up black people who had not returned to Greenwood and taking them to the conventional hall on Brady Street for detention. Many prominent Tulsa white people also participated in the riot, including Tulsa founder and KKK member W.T. Brady, who participated in the riot as a night watchman. He reported seeing 5 dead Negroes, including one man who was dragged behind the car by a noose around his neck. At midnight, white rioters against Navy assembled outside court. It was a smaller group, but more organised and determined. They shouted in support of a lynching. When they attempted to storm the building, the sheriff and his deputies turned them away and dissipated them. Really? How did he turn them away when they attempted to storm the building? Alright, so June the 1st, throughout the early mornings, groups of armed white people and black people squared off in gunfights. At this point, the fighting was concentrated along sections of Frisco, a divided line between black and white commercial districts. A rumour circulated that more black people were coming from wherever it was to help with an invasion of Tulsa. At one point, passengers on an incoming train were forced to take cover on the floor of the train as they arrived in the midst of crossfire, with the train taking hits on both sides. Small groups of white people made brief forays by car into Greenwood, indiscriminately firing into businesses and residents. They often received return fire. Meanwhile, white rioters threw lighted white rags into several buildings along Arthur Street, igniting them. Around 1 a.m., white were being mainly in business on Commercial Street at the southern end of the district. As crews from the Tulsa Fire Brigade arrived to put out fires, they were turned away at gunpoint. By 4 a.m., an estimated 24 black-owned businesses had been set ablaze. As news travelled along Greenwood, residents in the early morning, many began to take up arms in defence of their community, while others began a mass exodus from the city. Throughout the night, both sides continued fighting, sometimes only sporadically. Upon the 5 a.m. sunrise, reportedly a train whistle was heard. Someone said it was a siren. Many believed this to be a signal for the rioters to launch an all-out assault on Greenwood. A white man stepped out from behind the Frisco department and was fatally shot by a sniper in Greenwood. Good. Hopefully right up his arse. Crowds of rioters poured from places of shelter on foot and by car into the streets of the black community. 5 white men in a car led the charge, but were killed by a flurry of gunfire before they had gone a block. Good. Fuck them. Overwhelmed by the sheer number of white people, many black people retreated north on Greenwood Avenue to the edge of town, as terrified residents fled for their lives. The rioters shot indiscriminately and killed many residents along the way. Split into small groups, they began breaking into homes and buildings, looting. Several black people later testified that white people broke into occupied homes and ordered the residents onto the street, where they could be driven or forced to walk into detention centres. A rumour spread among the white people that the new Zionist church was being used as a fortress and armory. Perpetually 20 caskets full of rifles had been delivered to the church, though no evidence was ever found. Numerous saints who fired rifles and dropped fire bombs on buildings. and fleeing families. The planes probably carrying 6 biplanes, 2 men trainers left over from World War One, as well as other privately owned aircraft, were dispatched from nearby Curtis Southwest Field outside Tulsa. Law enforcement Law enforcement authorities later stated that the planes were to provide reconnaissance and protect against a Negro uprising. Carry on, bunch of lying bastards. Law enforcement personnel were thought to be aboard at least some flights. Eyewitness accounts such as testimony from survivors during commission hearings and a manuscript by witnesses and attorney Buck Colbert Franklin, discovered in 2015, said that on the morning of June the 1st, men in the planes dropped incendiary bombs and fired rifles at black residents on the ground. Extraordinary, isn't it? These are citizens of the United of that country, and they're being slaughtered with the latest technology. As unrest spread to other parts of the city, here we go. Many middle-class white families who employed black people in their homes as living cooks and servants were accosted by white rioters. They demanded families turn over employees and taken detention centres around the city. Many white families complied, and those who refused were subjected to attacks and vandalism in turn. Well, what do you expect them to do? They didn't have any choice. Arrival of the National Guard. General Charles Burkett of the Oklahoma National Guard arrived with 109 troops from Oklahoma City by special train about 9:15. Ordered in by the governor, he could not legally act until he had been contacted had contacted all the authorities, including the mayor, the T.D. Evans, the sheriff, and the police chief. Meanwhile, troops paused to eat breakfast. Very important. You must have your breakfast. Could be your last meal. Barrett summoned reinforcements from several other Oklahoma cities. By this time, thousands of surviving black citizens had fled the city. Around 4,000 persons had been rounded up and detained at various centers. Under the martial law established this day, these detainees were required to carry identification cards. Barrett declared martial law at 49 p.m. and suppressed most of the main pilots. A 1921 after the service company for the infantry Oklahoma National Guard, who arrived May 31st, reported numerous events related to suppress of the riot. Okay. Taking about 30 to 40 African Americans into custody, putting a machine gun on the truck and taking it on patrol, being fired on from black snipers from the church and returning fire, being fired on by white men. Did you return fire? Turning the prison over to deputies to take them to police headquarters, being fired upon by Negroes and having 2 NCOs wounded, searching for Negroes with firearms, detailing an NCO to take 170 Negroes to the still the authorities and delivering additional 150 Negroes to the detention center. So this is the most important thing, is to detain the Negroes. Nothing to do with the other whites, just the Negroes. Little Africa on fire, apparently taken from the rooftop of the Hotel Tulsa on the 3rd Street between Boston Avenue and Cincinnati Avenue. Cincinnati, a few roadblocks along 2nd Street. Is identified in Tulsa tribute version of this project as being where this fire started. The riot was covered by national newspapers, and the reported number of deaths varies widely. On June 1st, 1920, this is the aftermath, the casualty, the Tulsa Tribune reported that 9 white people and 68 black people had died in the riot, but shortly afterwards it changed its number to a total of 176 dead. The next day the same reported count as 9 white people and 21 black people. The New York Times said that 77 people were killed. But later, the Richmond Times Dispatch of Virginia reported 85 people, including 25 white people killed. It also reported that the police chief had reported to Governor Robinson that the total was 75, and that the police major put the figure 175. So, various different documents say different, whatever. Red Cross, though, estimated it must have run up to at least 300. At least. Walter Francis White of the NAACP travelled to Tulsa from New York and reported that although officials and indicators said that fatalities numbered 10 and 21 blacks, 10 whites and 21 coloured, he estimated the number of the dead to be 50 whites and between 150 to 200 Negroes. He also reported that 10 white men were killed on Tuesday, 6 white drove into the black section and never came out. Good. And never came out. I like that. 30 whites were killed on Wednesday. He reported that the head of the Salvation Army in Tulsa said that 37 Negroes were employed as grave diggers to bury 170 Negroes in individual graves without coffins on the Friday and the Saturday. The Los Angeles Express headline said 175 killed, many wounded. So this was reported in these papers, in the New York Times, Los Angeles Express, etc., etc. If we know what's going on. This, as I said, a film needs to be detailed, taken. There's so much information here. There's so much information here. I'll close down now with my thoughts. I would like somebody black film director to do this, because this is very, very, very important. This is at least cinematic. This is something that could be covered and made into a cinema, because this is far, far more important than that useless film about those 3 black women working in NASA. So, if you've listened to this, thank you very much. I sign off.